identitas diri. Hal ini menunjukkan individu bukan dikontrol oleh sebuah struktur. Ini kemungkinan akan menjadi pokok bahasan yang utama. Kita masuk pada satu penggambaran semacam ini. Kita menjumpai tradisionalis di mana ini sebenarnya hal yang umum di dalam pembagian-pembagian perkembangan generasi, tetapi saya mengemukakan kembali sebenarnya apa yang terkait dengan hal yang muncul di dalam praktek-praktek sosial, termasuk produksi-produksi yang mereka kemukakan. Di dalam munculnya satu generasi di dalam generasi tradisional, atau ada yang mengatakan lost generasi atau silent generasi, di mana kekuatan-kekuatan atribut etnik dan berbagai perangkat yang muncul itu sangat-sangat eksotik, kemudian seringkali nanti akan digunakan sebagai retorika bahwa lokal itu akan digunakan untuk berbicara secara global. Secara mentalitas mereka tampil di dalam bentuk-bentuk yang terkait dengan aspek mentalitas patriotik. Karena kalau kita perhatikan sebenarnya sebelum Perang Dunia Kedua, hal ini sebenarnya sangat kuat sekali. Sangat kuat sekali. Sehingga kalau membicarakan tentang patriotik, ya waktu itu sebenarnya yang tepat. Patriotik saat ini kemungkinan sudah akan bergeser. Artinya bergeser atributnya, bergeser simbol-simbolnya, bergeser penampilan-penampilan yang dapat muncul di dalam sebuah produksi virtual. Berikutnya kita juga akan menjumpai tentang baby boomer. Ini mungkin bisa diperhatikan mereka-mereka yang lahir, termasuk ini generasi saya ini. Karena generasi-generasi setelah kolonial ini sebenarnya punya mentalitas yang profesional, sehingga aspek yang diutamakan adalah imaji-imaji sebagai sebuah pekerja, sebuah profesi yang itu akan memberikan prestis yang tinggi. Kalau zaman-zaman itu orang selalu idolakan, ingin jadi dokter, ingin jadi insinyur, ingin jadi pilot. Wah, itu sesuatu yang prestis. Tapi belum tentu sekarang seperti itu. Nah, sehingga generasi ini mempunyai karakter, mempunyai cara berimajinasi, mempunyai produk-produk virtual yang berbeda. Sehingga hal ini juga akan melanda perfilman juga, di mana ikon-ikon yang tampil itu sangat khas dan berbeda dengan hal yang sekarang. Kita jumpai berikutnya generasi X. Ini generasi yang sudah mulai berubah, walaupun kalau diperhatikan tidak banyak berbeda, tetapi sangat dirasakan bahwa generasi ini yang pertama kali utamanya, karena perhatian saya banyak di Indonesia, maka generasi yang lahir pada era generasi X ini adalah mereka yang menikmati televisi yang pertama. Mungkin waktu masih kecil melihat televisi itu sesuatu yang sangat luar biasa. Dan mereka akan menolak film layar lebar. Ini mulai menjadi embrio bagaimana satu generasi sudah mempunyai perbedaan-perbedaan di dalam mempersepsi virtual. Kemudian generasi milenial, di mana orang sudah sangat masuk di dalam produktivitas yang menggunakan sesuatu yang lebih teknologis. Mereka sudah meninggalkan mesin ketik, mereka sudah masuk, walaupun ada generasi baby boomer yang seringkali memparadokkan, di mana generasi ini mereka bisa bekerja di mesin komputer, tetapi mereka tidak terampil menggunakan mesin ketik manual. Hal-hal semacam itu seringkali tidak ada gunanya untuk dibicarakan. Kemudian kita akan melihat lagi generasi Z. Ini adalah generasi yang menggambarkan satu pola media di dalam kehidupannya. Mereka di mana-mana dan sudah dapat dipastikan sosial media itu menjadi bagian dari kehidupannya. Dan ini akan memberikan corak dan karakter yang berbeda. Apakah yang mereka bayangkan, apakah mereka impikan sudah tidak lagi sama dengan generasi sebelumnya. Nah, ini saya tidak membicarakan, tapi ini sesuatu yang nanti akan terasa betul. Kita mungkin sekarang tidak terasa, atau generasi sebelumnya tradisionalis atau baby boomer tidak merasakan, tetapi generasi berikutnya akan sungguh-sungguh merasakan bahwa ada generasi yang di mana hidupnya ada di sosial media. Dan ini menjadi sesuatu yang sangat menarik. Kalau kita tarik sebuah garis, maka akan terjadi rentangan semacam ini. Tradisionalis, baby boomer, generasi X, milenial, Z, dan kemudian alpha. Diperhatikan secara umum memang tidak ada bedanya, tetapi ada sesuatu yang menarik untuk dibicarakan, dikupas, kemudian menjadi perhatian kita semua. Dan saya menggarisbawahi bahwa pemandangan ini adalah hasil dari pemahaman saya utamanya, didasarkan pada satu hal yang memang sering saya gunakan di dalam pembahasan ilmu sosial. Saya lebih menikmati dari satu pola-pola pikiran yang terkait dengan fungsional struktural, kemudian strukturalisme. Kemudian ini adalah satu hal yang mungkin baru, apakah itu menolak sebelumnya atau itu menjadi satu pemahaman berikutnya, adalah pemahaman yang seringkali disebut sebagai strukturalisme, di mana strukturalisme terus berkembang menjadi konstruksi-konstruksi sosial baru, dan ini menjadi pemahaman yang berikutnya. Kita akan melihat secara keseluruhan bagaimana sebuah generasi itu memproduksi secara virtual. Ini skema praktek sosial, di mana skema inilah yang ingin saya tawarkan, bagaimana satu eko budaya itu berkembang. Kenapa kita masih menikmati pola-pola generasi sebelumnya, apakah silent generasi atau tradisionalis ini masih kita rasakan sekarang, karena ada satu persinggungan ini. Nah, persinggungan inilah yang memberikan satu pola-pola pemahaman. Utamanya saya akan menyoroti generasi X ini. Bagaimana pola mereka menjadi sesuatu yang rasional, kemudian individual, kemudian hal-hal yang terkait dengan praktek-praktek yang dikemukakan. Dan ini diikuti atau dibentuk atau ikut di dalam satu pola di dalam perkembangan sosial media. Nah, sosial media ini yang mereka masuk di dalam wilayah-wilayah ini. Sebagai gambaran utama yang mungkin seringkali dirasakan oleh perkembangan baby boomer, di mana tradisionalis itu ada aspek yang idealistik, fungsional. Ketika mereka memproduksi hal yang bersifat virtual mereka tidak menggunakan teknologi tapi per virtual imajiner. Bagaimana sebuah wayang, tentunya wayang tidak hanya di Jawa, tetapi di berbagai tempat itu menggunakan utamanya. Nah, kemudian ini seringkali juga akan melanda generasi X. Bagaimana mereka juga terinspirasi membuat satu hal yang ada di dalam pola perkembangan dari tradisionalis ini. Tetapi apa yang mereka kerjakan adalah yang mereka kerjakan lebih besar dengan apa yang telah mereka pahami pada generasi itu. Sementara yang ada di tradisionalis ini sangat tipis sekali. Semakin tipis kemudian ini juga kemudian membesar, maka referensinya ini semakin tipis. Maka jangan disalahkan. Jangan disalahkan kalau pada generasi X itu tidak mengenal secara utuh apa yang terjadi di dalam tradisionalis ini. Maka di sini akan banyak hal. Maka tidak bisa serta-merta ada yang di perkembangan pada setiap generasi ini ditarik secara keseluruhan ada di generasi-generasi yang akan datang. Ini yang sebenarnya menjadi pokok pemahaman. Saya melontarkan pemikiran, maka saya tidak membicarakan hal-hal yang sifatnya mikro. Walaupun nanti dalam diskusi kemungkinan besar itu akan meminta, akan mengklarifikasi dari apa yang terkait dengan praktek-praktek yang terjadi. Nah, ini yang kemungkinan menjadi bagian utama dari apa yang saya kemukakan. Saya sengaja tidak menguraikan secara lebih mendalam supaya ada sesuatu yang lebih menarik untuk dibicarakan. Karena pemahaman-pemahaman di setiap praktek sosial ini mempunyai implikasi. Tetapi sebagai sebuah pemahaman umum, seringkali kita akan melihat secara keseluruhan ini menjadi bagian yang tanpa ada sekat. Dan ini yang kemungkinan menjadi bagian. Atau pada generasi itu ada sesuatu yang memiliki hal yang keberpihakan, apakah secara emosional atau secara politis. maka dampak-dampak yang akan kita pahami pada generasi X, kemudian milenial dan Z ini menjadi sesuatu yang berbeda. Sebagai hal yang kemungkinan kita rasakan, termasuk saya singgung juga di dalam makalah saya sebenarnya, pandemik COVID-19 ini salah satu yang akan memicu, mempercepat peralihan generasi. Dan peralihan generasi ini akan berdampak sangat luar biasa. Di mana di kemudian hari paling tidak dirasakan oleh generasi Z ini, bahwa institusi formal itu sebenarnya akan mengalami hal-hal yang destruktif. Sehingga hal-hal yang terkait dengan praktek-praktek pemolahan itu akan menjadi lemah. Tetapi setiap orang di sini mempunyai kebebasan sehingga dianggap praktek-praktek produksi virtual pada generasi Z ini dianggap sangat demokratis. Mereka bisa bicara banyak hal, bisa bereaksi secara lebih ekspresif. Dan ini sangat menarik untuk didiskusikan. Saya kira itu yang bisa saya sampaikan. Mungkin hal-hal tertentu akan dijelaskan di dalam diskusi berikutnya. Terima kasih, mohon maaf kekurangan yang saya miliki.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Robi atas penjelasannya. Ini saya rasa juga banyak hal yang bisa kita explore dari sini ya Pak Robi. So for international attendees, that Pak Robi, Bapak Dr. Robi is explaining about how the generational gap in traditional art in traditional arts and in how it can be virtually how it can be virtually produced, and how these gaps of generation can be actually can be a better solution for the next development of the production of the performance art in the future. Jadi Pak Robi, ini sudah ada 2 pertanyaan yang masuk. Saya akan membacakan nih Pak. Jadi selamat sore Pak Robi, saya ingin mengetahui pandangan Bapak, hal positif dan hal negatif tentang digitalisasi budaya yang berkembang saat ini. Mengingat zaman saat ini terjadi peralihan ke zaman digital yang diakses oleh generasi milenial. Ini dari Nyoman Suwarya. Monggo Pak Robi mungkin ada tanggapan terlebih dahulu.
Terima kasih. Sebagai seorang peneliti, saya tidak akan memberikan judgement mana yang lebih baik, mana yang tidak. Tetapi itulah kenyataannya. Itu kenyataan bahwa ada perbedaan. Kita yang merasakan, tetapi pada saat generasi tradisionalis, mereka nggak merasakan. Mereka nggak merasakan. Kalaupun ini sebenarnya banyak asumsi-asumsi yang muncul itu karena produk dari baby boomer. Karena baby boomer itu adalah salah satu generasi yang sangat dekat dengan hal yang masa lalu. Nah, ini yang sebenarnya akan banyak memberikan menilai adanya satu hal yang negatif. Sehingga orang yang selalu merasakan bahwa saya sebagai bagian dari baby boomer itu seringkali tidak nyaman melihat Anda yang lahir sebagai generasi X. tidak nyaman melihat Anda yang sebagai generasi milenial. Kemudian tidak nyaman melihat Anda sebagai generasi Z. Karena apa? Ketika Anda itu menggunakan dunianya virtual itu, saya tidak bisa memahami seluruhnya apa yang sebenarnya Anda nikmati. Tetapi Anda juga begitu. Anda juga tidak bisa memahami pikiran saya kenapa saya tidak senang Anda. Nah, ini yang sebenarnya harus diurai sehingga kita akan menjadi sesuatu yang sangat natural, sangat murni di dalam satu perubahan generasi itu. Maka saya condong untuk memihak pada pemikiran Gieden, strukturasi. Strukturasi itu bukan karena struktur, tetapi ada negosiasi antara aktor dengan struktur. Seberapa besar struktur yang Anda gunakan itu tergantung. Saya sebagai baby boomer akan banyak menggunakan struktur yang terbentuk dari generasi tradisionalis. Tetapi Anda yang jauh, generasi Z ini tidak mungkin menggunakan struktur pada tradisionalis. Terus kenapa kok terjadi penilaian semacam itu? Satu hal yang saya perhatikan ada aspek politis. Ada aspek jealous ketidaksetujuan objek tidak subjektif, sangat subjektif, dan itu tidak bisa dijelaskan. Nah, ini yang saya tidak memberikan bahwa sosial media itu jelek atau tidak. Itu memang zamannya. Yang menikmati adalah generasi itu sendiri. Saya kira itu, dan moga-moga Anda tidak mengikuti pikiran saya.
Okay, so for international students, I'm just going to explain what Pak Robi just explained. So Pak Robi suggests that the generational gap between baby boomers, the X generation, and then millennials probably is because of a political tendency, probably, or there is a political tendency, as well as the unknown, the factor of unknown, the unknown factor of how generation is communicating to each other. So I don't know, probably Pak Robi also suggesting in the before the explanation, Pak Robi suggesting that those kinds of interaction also is very unnecessary. So we should probably communicate better. I think that's what the rhythm of what Pak Robi just explains. Jadi mudah-mudahan tadi untuk Bapak Mas atau Mbak Nyoman Suwarya ini itu mudah-mudahan menjawab, nggih. Mudah-mudahan menjawab ya Pak Nyoman, Pak atau Bu Nyoman. Itu seperti itu. Nah, untuk pertanyaan berikutnya Pak Robi, ini Pak Robi banyak nih soal yang nanya Pak. Seru soalnya Pak, karena kita ngomongin generational gap, dan generational gap itu sangat nyata mungkin ya Pak ya. Tidak hanya di penggunaan platform, tapi juga bagaimana kita menghayati apa yang sedang apa yang menjadi apa yang menjadi budaya, dan juga bagaimana cara budaya tersebut dikomunikasikan secara turun-menurun, mungkin seperti itu. Kemudian ini ada pertanyaan dari Mas Pras. Ini bukan Mas Prasnya UM sepertinya Pak. Jadi ini Mas Pras yang lain. Jadi Mas Pras bertanya, khususnya di daerah Malang terjadi gap yang sangat lebar antara generasi tua dan muda. Kira-kira apa penyebab dari kesenjangan ini? And I would like to translate before. So Mas Pras is asking whether the generational gap in Malang is also is it because of the long gap between generation because the transition between culture of generation is very it's too big. Mungkin itu Pak Robi bisa dijawab terlebih dahulu.
Terima kasih. Nah, itu yang saya perhatikan, di mana waktu itu tidak bisa kita tempati, tetapi ruang itu kita perebutkan. Kita sebenarnya merebutkan ruang. Di mana di sisi tertentu, paling tidak banyak yang sudah masih sekarang itu menjadi status quo itu ada pada baby boomer. Nah, ketika baby boomer itu tidak memberikan ruang pada generasi berikutnya, maka itu terjadi gap. Pada waktu baby boomer itu sesuatu yang sangat memiliki ciri-ciri yang sangat luar biasa. Manis, kemudian solidaris, tapi ya konvensional. Dia mengatur keseimbangan alam digunakan sebagai satu retorika. Tetapi generasi berikutnya tidak. Generasi X menghendaki satu identitas. Kalau di tempat-tempat tertentu ada yang masih membunyikan identitas lokal, identitas macam-macam. Orang ada di generasi X dan generasi alpha berikutnya tidak akan membicarakan tentang identitas. Mereka tidak butuh identitas. Nah, ini yang seringkali sering akan berbenturan. Sehingga ruang sosial itu menjadi perebutan untuk mengekspresikan diri. Ketika tidak mendapatkan ekspresi yang tepat, maka dia tidak akan bisa berekspresi dengan leluasan. Maka produk-produk teknologi sosial media sekarang ini sebenarnya mewadahi itu. Apakah kita yang bodoh atau mereka yang lebih pintar untuk yang merekonstruksi itu? Tetapi yang jelas itulah mereka sudah membaca generasi. Kita tidak membaca generasi. Kita adalah mengembangkan sentimen generasi. Sehingga itu tidak akan bisa. Sehingga kalau saya berdebat dengan generasi X umpamanya dengan pola tertentu tanpa saya berpikir dengan praktek sosial, skema praktek sosial ini, itu tidak ada habisnya. Maka ketika saya mencoba untuk membuat satu pola skema praktek sosial ini, saya akan bisa tahu apa yang mereka bicarakan, apa yang mereka minta, kemudian apa yang saya tahu. Sehingga ini menjadi hal yang, sehingga di dalam kelas juga gitu. Nanti akan didesak open class ini sebenarnya waktu yang menjadi pemicu saja di sana. Kita didesak keluar kelas, nah itulah sebenarnya. Pada generasi X dan berikutnya, mereka tidak akan belajar di kelas. Walaupun pandeminya sudah selesai. Mereka telah nyaman menikmati ruang kebebasan di mana mereka bisa mengeksplor dirinya sendiri. Dan ini ditangkap oleh pemerintah, ditangkap oleh institusi pendidikan kita. Bagaimana sebenarnya orang diberikan leluasan untuk bisa mengkonstruk dirinya sendiri, bukan dikonstruk oleh generasi-generasi berikutnya. Nah, ini yang sebenarnya apakah nanti generasi saya ini laku untuk mengajar atau tidak, itu yang menjadi tantangan. Karena nggak guna, pikiran saya tidak guna untuk generasi berikutnya. Tetapi ketika saya mencoba untuk memahami skema generasi ini, saya sebenarnya bisa masuk di wilayah generasi-generasi yang terjadi berikutnya tanpa saya harus meminta ruang mereka untuk minggir. Ya, saya kira itu.
Baik, ini sangat menarik Pak Robi karena saya jadi teringat ada ya kalau berbicara tentang ruang ya, ini berebut ruang, apakah benar nih kita berebut ruang atau kita punya ruang masing-masing yang sebenarnya bisa kita tempati kemudian apa ya, saling bersambung gitu ruangnya. Okay, for international attendees, that Pak Robi just explained that there's a probability that this these gaps in generation practitioners, it's probably because of the space that's probably more packed right now. So there is a possibility that the older generation is being I don't know how you call it, probably moved from their usual place when they performs, or when their spaces are being invaded by the newest generation, while probably the new generation doesn't think that they invade the before generation. It's probably just because of the times also changes, the technology also changes. So probably like that, I think what Pak Robi was explaining. And if you have any other translation for that, probably you can also help me in translating that. Oke, Pak Robi. Jadi ada lagi nih Pak pertanyaan. Saya seru banget nih kayaknya, kan jadi banyak pertanyaan soalnya pertanyaannya terus. Saya ingin membacakan pertanyaan dari Ibu Ranti atau Mbak Ranti. Selamat siang Pak, mohon izin bertanya, apa yang harus dilakukan agar digitalisasi budaya yang terjadi saat ini tidak mengurangi nilai estetika dari budaya itu sendiri? Mengingat bahwa dalam setiap pertunjukan seni budaya yang dilakukan secara virtual, banyak nilai-nilai estetika yang justru tidak tampak. I will translate the question before that. So the question is about how do we, from Ibu Ranti, so Mbak Ranti, Ibu or Mbak Ranti is asking about how do we still manage, how do we manage to contain the aesthetics of the culture itself while it is displayed in virtual space. Monggo Pak Robi mungkin bisa direspon terlebih dahulu.
Terima kasih. Moga-moga apa yang isi pertanyaan itu bukan karena sesuatu yang ketidaksadaran kita menjadi berpihak. Artinya estetik itu bersifat fungsional. Estetik itu tepat pada zamannya. Apakah pada zaman berikutnya estetik itu dipakai? Ya, ketika generasi itu menyetujui dan berfungsi. Tetapi kalau tidak berfungsi, maka estetik itu tidak mereka gunakan. Dan hal-hal tertentu memang terasa. Ini terasanya pada milenial. Generasi milenial ini memang sesuatu yang sebenarnya membuka jalan. Jalan menyadarkan bahwa dunia ini sudah berubah. Budaya ini sudah berubah. Nah, perubahan-perubahan itu termasuk estetik. Sementara berbagai hal yang kita pelajari seringkali masih menggunakan hal-hal yang lama tetapi dipaksakan untuk dipakai. Artinya secara politik itu dinyatakan bahwa ini yang paling bagus untuk Anda. Estetik itu dihayati. Nah, hal tertentu yang mungkin bisa kita seringkali menjadi kita agak kecewa atau marah macam-macam. Ada hal yang kemungkinan teori-teori tertentu sudah mematahkan. Satu, mulai mematahkan aktor. Aktor sudah dianggap mati. Jadi yang memproduksi pikiran itu sudah tidak lagi dibutuhkan. Kalau di dalam generasi tradisionalis atau silent generasi, yang namanya skenario itu masih dibutuhkan. Tetapi sekarang tidak membutuhkan skenario. Kemudian di generasi X kita menjumpai bahwa matinya struktur. Struktur sudah kita tidak menggunakan lagi. Aturan, tata aturan, berbagai kaidah tertentu itu sifatnya kondisional. Di mana itu dipakai. Nah ini yang seringkali di mana praktek budaya itu sebagai satu pola tindakan membentuk satu komunitas di mana sebuah budaya itu sebagai produk. Budaya itu bisa menjadi produk. Budaya tidak hanya sebagai produk yang diproduksi sebagai barang, tetapi sebagai tingkah laku. Ketika saya mempelajari kebudayaan orang Afrika, maka saya membentuk budaya Afrika itu menjadi produk di dalam diri saya. Maka dengan orang Afrika sana saya dilulukan. Itu orang Indonesia yang tidak ada sangkut pautnya dengan Afrika. Dia sangat mendalami produk dari suku terasing di Afrika. Itu jangan disamaratakan bahwa itu praktek sosial. Itu adalah produk. Ketika itu menjadi produk, Anda jangan terkacaukan semacam itu. Sehingga diri saya memang dibentuk dengan estetika itu supaya saya menjadi produk. Nah ini yang seringkali kita akan membenturkan dengan praktek sosial. Nah praktek-praktek sosial yang seringkali kita orang tradisional atau boomer mengkritisi itu hilang tata krama. Bagaimana tata krama itu bisa dipraktekkan ketika tuntutan kerja, tuntutan ruang, tuntutan waktu, tuntutan efisiensi, tuntutan berbagai hal yang itu terjadi, kemudian kita harus atau kondisi-kondisi yang semacam ini benturan dari aspek-aspek yang terkait dengan mudik segala. Apakah kita harus mudik? Wong namanya apa itu sosial media begitu lengkap digunakan. Hanya emosi culture emosional kita saja yang sebenarnya ingin kembali ke masa lalu. Tetapi tidak menyadari bahwa sebenarnya hal yang esensial juga sudah mencakup itu. Nah ini yang terkait dengan pasti ketika Anda bertanya semacam itu, Anda akan selalu gerah dengan melihat budaya yang ada di TikTok sekarang. Pasti itu, pasti. Dan ketika itu gerah, Anda menjadi sentimen, Anda tidak bisa menganalisis dengan sangat rasional sebenarnya apa yang terjadi di era ini atau terjadi dalam diri Anda sendiri. Nah ini yang terkait dengan estetika. Maka kalau kita bilang bahwa estetika A sudah mati, itu jangan disesali. Kemudian ada aspek-aspek simbolik, maka saya seringkali mengemukakan ada sesuatu yang juga mengkhawatirkan dan mengecewakan kita. Simbol itu sudah mati. Apa yang tampil realita? Apakah virtual, sosial media itu virtual? Tidak, itu realita sekarang. Tetapi oleh orang-orang tradisionalis itu virtual. Dukun dulu, dukun di mana dukun terus ada apa itu belanga, kemudian berikan mantra, kemudian ada kelihatan gambar di situ. Wah, ini pencurinya. Ketika itu bisa seperti itu, pada waktu itu sebenarnya dia itu menghayati virtual, bukan realita. Tetapi sekarang itu realita, bukan virtual. Nah, hal semacam ini yang seringkali mari kita explore bersama-sama sehingga kita tidak lagi tadi itu terjadi gap. Ngapain gap hidupnya sendiri-sendiri? Kita bisa mengembangkan, mengeksplor ruang ekspresi sosial dan budaya sendiri sebenarnya. Ya, terima kasih. Moga-moga menjawab.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Robi. Itu sebenarnya banyak sih akhirnya yang bisa kita explore dari situ jawabannya. So for international attendees, I will translate it for you. So basically, well, not really translate all of it because there's a lot of it. So Pak Robi mentioned about the difference between product from social services with social practice. So we need to be conscious about which is which that we do, because social practice is that we are going to be involved in the actual practice rather than just making something to just producing something from social acts, from the social services. So it's very different. And it's that's how we know about how we are going to appreciate the aesthetics. So the aesthetics itself also a different kind of there is a different kind of method that we will use to how do you call it in English? Probably to feel it in a way. So Pak Robi also mentioned, so the aesthetic itself is also to be felt, not just to be seen or to be heard or other actions that that's just on the surface, but it's on the inside. It's more like a feeling in a way. I think that's probably it, and that's the main thing, but it's a lot longer than that. And I would like to invite all of the attendees to engage with Professor Robi, Professor Inshallah, Dr. Robi further by email probably, or by Dr. Robi's social media. Dr. Robi also have a YouTube account. Pak Robi punya YouTube ya, Pak?
Ya, ada.
Nah, so you can visit Pak Robi's account, Pak Robi's YouTube, and then see Pak Robi there as well.
Anda bisa buka di Play Store, kemudian nama saya di situ akan tergabung antara publisher saya, kemudian YouTube, kemudian blog, semuanya ada di sana. Nama saya Robi Hidayat.
Robi Hidayat. Just search it on the Google box, Robi Hidayat, and then you will see the YouTube account and then the Facebook and other social media account. Mungkin itu Pak Robi, terima kasih banyak atas penjelasannya.
Sama-sama.
And I am sorry for a couple of questions that's not going to be answered, but probably we can engage in a more further discussion after this, because I will move to the next plenary panelist, and I am going to okay, I am going to invite our final panelist, also my bestest friend, Terry Newman from United Kingdom. Hello, welcome to the forum.
Hello, welcome to Cambridge in England.
Virtually.
Virtually.
Exactly. Okay, I will introduce you a little bit. So Terry is a teacher, an artist teacher as well. So she's a head. So if I'm making a mistake, then you can correct me later. Terry is the head of art in Elstree Screen Screen Arts Academy, and then Terry also a researcher at Goldsmiths University of London, and now doing the PhD. I don't know which year is it, but she's doing amazing. So today, Terry will tell us and present to us about what she's about her research, about the collaboration, and I offer this forum to you now. And Terry, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you again for the committee for inviting me to speak. I'm going to share my screen with you now. Here we are. So that you can see my slides. You should be able to. Oh, ooh, I'm so sorry. This always happens,
yeah.
Not?
Yeah.
Can you see my slides okay?
Yeah, we see your slides, okay.
Okay, perfect. Because I just want to bring up I can't see my shared screen. Is that, can you still see my slides?
Yeah, I think this is okay.
Yeah.
We can do this. We can use this, we can use the screen.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm gonna head straight in, and there'll obviously be time for some questions afterwards. The theme of the conference that we're all here for today is the complexity of art and design in education to preserve cultural sustainability. I'm taking my point of departure that the meaning of culture in this context is defined as a set of beliefs, morals, methods, and collections of human knowledge and the ways that they're transmitted. In this presentation, I'd like to discuss how collaborative pedagogies enable younger generations to self-identify and share their cultural beliefs, ideologies, and human experience, and in turn work towards a more decolonized curriculum. I'm going to discuss how I believe collaborative pedagogies can support young artists to create a curriculum that enables them to rethink structures of control and leadership and expectations within the classroom. I'm going to discuss how I believe that there is a need for this redistribution of hierarchies in the classroom, draw on two strands of theory, just slightly to support this proposition before going on to outline my practice. So I'm just going to, here we are. As an educator, I ask myself regularly what the job of a school is, and some may say that it's to enable young people to pass their exams, others to teach the skills required to be valued members of society, and others to formally learn about the subjects that one feels passionate about. After being a student, undergraduate, postgraduate researcher, and a teacher within the system for over 33 years, I feel informed to declare that the school system in the UK, and I'm sure across the world, exists to reinforce the cultural beliefs, values, and ideologies of the institution, or perhaps the society that founded the institution. I feel that the school system has formed structures of obedience, lone working, and aesthetic ideologies that I would argue do not educate young people, but in fact close the child to the possibility of anything other than that which is expected of them. To succeed in a school is to learn to fit the model or the mold and preserve only the dominant narrative. As time passes, we see the ebb and flow of political party principles played out in the approaches to teaching and learning within schools that seek only to prepare students to be passive and conforming and unquestioning recipients of what's come to be known as British values in the UK. I think I have a, so I just having a look at these slides really quickly. There's a couple of pieces of work here that we would really expect in the UK as being kind of the standard school look of what art would look like. These are all pieces of work that would receive a stereotypically high grade. Brent Wilson's 1974 outline theory of child art continues to hold relevance even 48 years after publication. He said that in effect, the art teacher often says, do this project, and if you do it well, I'll give you praise, recognition, or a good grade. On the other hand, he says, if you don't follow the rules, I'll reject your work or I'll give you a bad mark. The subtext here, of course, is that the student must produce the project in line with the taste and ideals and aesthetic values held by the teacher, or risk being bad. We see this again in Efland, who articulates the detachment between the work of artists who create it in response to a constellation of situations that reside within a culture, and the schools-based projects that intend to educate young people about the world. And here I'm referring to these this overuse of the fragmented portrait that we see as a kind of defragmentation of the personality. I suggest that these projects, although well-meaning, only pay marginal lip service to the complex, diverse and interconnected nature of what it really means to be an artist, and indeed, more importantly, what it means to be a young person in the world. In short, art education in schools is not a pedagogical tool for emancipation of a society, but rather one that creates a tunneled vision for the function of dominant discourses. The school I propose is an exemplification of what Jacques Rancière describes as a distribution of the sensible, a regime of what is possible and what can be understood. A distribution of the sensible is a set of self-evident facts of sense, perception, that simultaneously discloses the existence of something in common and eliminates the defines retrospective parts of positions within it. So if we have a look here at this slide, I'm talking essentially about who is included and excluded from dominant discourses based on the language that a young person has and their experiences and abilities to access that knowledge. As a learner of art and design, the curriculum as it stands rewards those that speak and act in ways that support the dominant narrative, who are rewarded with continued access, whereas those whose life experience do not mirror the dominant are excluded. As a side note, it's worth mentioning that the experiences that I'm speaking of have come to be known in the UK as protected characteristics. This is enshrined in law. These are the characteristics of equality and human rights, and we describe those as age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy, race, religion, belief, and sexual orientation. And you can find much more information about those on the Government and Equalities website. Now, I must stress that this presentation is not a suggestion that the education system in the United Kingdom actively excludes any young person that falls within one of these categories, but rather it's the subtle nuances of behaviour that are ingrained within the system that indicate a cultural design that promotes the dominant discourse and fetishizes the non-dominant. I've got a slide to yeah, so I am going to go on to talk about, these are the protected characteristics under the Equality Act 2010. Let me provide an example. Within my department, there are currently, so I'm just talking post-16, there are currently over 80 young adults between the ages of 16 and 20 studying for a full-time qualification in art and design in different specialisms and levels. My team consists of only 4 teachers, all of us white, all of us able-bodied, all of us born and raised in the United Kingdom, all presenting the gender assigned at birth, and all of us speaking only one language. The students, on the other hand, are a much closer representation of the diversity of young people in the United Kingdom. Between them, they speak many different languages. They're from 5 of the 7 continents. Some of them are extremely wealthy and others live in poverty. These young people have seen domestic violence, war, famine, gender reassignment surgery, and debilitating medical conditions that leave them disabled. My statement is essentially, who am I to tell them what their art is for? If we return now to Rancière, I think I have, if I return again to Rancière, artistic practices are ways of doing and making that intervene in the general distribution of ways of doing and making, as well as the relationships that maintain the models and beings and forms of visibility. Art making, under this suggestion, offers a voice to those who are silenced. It enables what Rancière calls a redistribution of the sensible, following a disruption of the dominant discourse, and therefore enables young artists to re-articulate an understanding of their own experience rather than fitting the status quo. It is not the objective of all art? Is it not the objective of all artists to articulate their understanding to an audience, to educate, to shed light on those things that are unseen? Somewhere along the way, the education of art and design and the way that it is schooled have become vastly separated, and the intentions from the intentions of what it means to be an artist in the world. So those of you sitting here will not be surprised to learn. I just want to, here we go. Sorry. Those of you sitting here will not be surprised to learn that I offer a proposal, proposition that the rethinking of the Lacanian L schema may open out an opportunity to look beyond the student-teacher binary towards a more rhizomatic learning model. Collaborative pedagogies have been the focus of my practice research since 2014. In a collaborative pedagogy, like all collaborations, there are a minimum of two parties, the self and the other. My research thesis is an investigation of the interaction between these two things, and Lacan's L schema is the basis upon which I build this understanding of the interaction. It's an illustration of the interconnectivity that forms the illusion of subjectivity within the world. So I'm just going to quickly go over and discuss this L schema that you can see in there. You should be able to see, I hope, in this.
We are. It's okay. We are seeing this clearly.
You are, excellent. So the schema describes the self, the object, the ego, and the other, as you can see them. The other, specified here by the small o and the big O, are categorized separately, opposite the subject and the ego. Let's consider them in turn. So the other, small o, illustrates the location of the ideal self, as outlined in Lacan's mirror stage. I won't go into that today because we don't have time, but the ideal self, the ideal I, does not exist in reality. It's the object of desire for the self that constantly falls away from our grasp as we move towards it. The ideal self, as I mentioned, is formulated in the mirror stage, a moment in child development, where the child experiences the relationships between the movements that they make as an object reflected back at them in the mirror, and the complex reality of understanding their physical body within the world and the impact that that can have. It's at the mirror stage that the child no longer exists as a sentient meat sack, essentially, but understands that they inhabit a complex relational world. The other, small o, is neither constant nor controllable. It's the desire to rectify the discordance that one feels with the image of the self. It's never fully whole, it's never satisfied, and it's always falling away from us. The term I, meaning ideal I, is in my work should be considered as I want to be, an understanding that the experience of the self is never whole, but it's frustratingly incomplete for the young person. Other, big O, as we can see in the schema, represents those outside of the self, so others. And in collaborative pedagogies, it's the negotiation between the other, large O, other, small o, and the ego that forms the basis of this proposition. I'm attempting to persuade you essentially that it's the triangulated interrelationship between ego, other that enables the removal of the teacher as the gateway of knowledge in the art and design classroom, and replace it with the learning relationship between these three things. As one falls away and replaces the other, this is where a learning relationship exists that is in constant flux and is not binary. Before I go on to apply this to my practice, I first want to make clear the applications that this has upon my plight. By equipping young people or young artists with the tools to look for learning encounters with peers, the teacher negates the requirement to bring only their voice into the classroom. The school becomes an environment that does not have one dominant narrative, but in fact, one that's rhizomatic and does not rely on the ideologies of the institution to build knowledge structure systems. But differently, collaborative pedagogies enable the young artist to learn about themselves in the gaze of others, rather than in the gaze of the teacher. So, the collaborative projects that I facilitate in my practice have taken many iterations over the last 8 years, but follow a similar format. And I'm just going to touch on some of the methodologies here. If you would like to have a look more in depth, you can go and have a look at my academia, where I discuss many of these things in much more depth. So at each, these projects have taken place both inside the curriculum, so meaning in the classroom, in classroom time, and outside of the classroom as kind of extracurricular projects. And at each stage of the projects is designed to subvert the teacher-student relationship and turn the gaze towards peer learning relationships in order to create communities of praxis within the classroom. So, excuse me. So firstly, learners are positioned in collaborative pairings selected by the teacher and are asked to always see their partner as their first point of call in all matters. Following icebreaker activities, I think I have some photographs of some icebreaker activities here for you. Following the icebreaker activities, the young artists undertake a think, pair, share activity that culminates in a group discussion led by the facilitating researcher. So usually that would be me. During these conversations, the young artists must decide upon a set of assessment criteria that will be their guiding principles throughout the project. And so every iteration of this project will change. The assessment criteria will change. The shift from working towards these externally set exam board assessment criteria supports the young artists to see the projects as assessed differently from their usual work, and therefore allows that paradigm shift. This, I've found, enables them to break away from some of the constraints enforced by the examination boards and see the artwork as something that is not a formulative pursuit of a grade, but rather a function of making art for a different purpose, one of using the one like we see artists outside of the secondary institution. So this academic year, here are their assessment criteria. So make sure that people have a say and feel confident to share their ideas. Make all artists feel that their individual intentions are represented within the work. Be mindful of your partner's comfort. Combine abilities. Communicate with honesty and respect. Have clarity on what your intentions are. Be there and imply yourself and embrace the experience. And for those of you that are working in secondary institutions, obviously these are vastly different from the kind of skills-based assessment criteria that we've come to know. So the second phase of the project is undertaken by all participants, is what I've come to call a three-dimensional mind map, and there's a couple of examples here. We can see Agni participating in one just here. There's another one. There's another one here. So in this, all learners work together to link their ideas, but not just their ideas, but their ideologies, their interests, their artistic intentions. And the objective of the three-dimensional mind map is to encourage the young artists to develop a deeper understanding of the interconnectivity of their retrospective practices as a group, and seeing themselves much more as a community of praxis rather than separate individuals who are all on separate trajectories. Following these two activities, the young artists spend the remainder of the project working together to co-create their artwork, regularly reflecting back on the progress that they've made and the ongoing purpose of the work for them. And we've come to call these reflection logs. The nuance of the student-teacher relationship becomes far more difficult to navigate during this phase of the project, as the desire to guide students in their ideas and intentions is deeply ingrained in my identity as a teacher. And I'm sure those of you who are classroom educators will empathise with this. I just want to show you a very quick example here of a presentation by some young people about their project that they wanted to go on, that I found positively distasteful. However, the requirement to hold back from providing your own judgment on their ideas is really, really paramount at this point in the project. When undertaking these projects, the difficulty is stepping back and not interjecting, allowing the young people to make stylistic and thematic choices that I don't like or find distasteful. Reminds me daily that it's not my work that they're creating, it's theirs and it's their own. And if we're moving to a space for a more culturally sustainable future, it must be my voice and not theirs that becomes quiet. The intention of this presentation is to offer a proposition that collaborative pedagogies in the classroom offer young artists the opportunity to redistribute knowledge through their own experience, rather than relying on top-down disseminations of knowledge. I've discussed some of the key underpinning ideas of my research and some of the methods and methodologies that I've employed to counteract the colonised curriculum in the UK. I propose that the positioning of the teacher as the font of knowledge is a misunderstanding not only of how people learn, but also can be a silencing act for voices of students that we claim to be teaching. I just want to very quickly, before we move into questions, I just want to go over, if we have time, Agni, just a couple of these.
We have a lot of time, Terry, so don't worry.
Just want to very quickly go over some of these reflection log pieces, because I think that they really, again, in showing you this work, I don't want to take away too much of the fact that it's not mine, it's theirs and it belongs to them. So I'm just going to read through a couple of these. This reflection is written by China Gerning, who's in the back here. We did a challenge to create the most tallest and durable hat. We answered Mrs. questions about ourselves, wrote them down and stuck them around the room. We then linked everyone's views and answers together to create one big mind map with string. And finally, we created a mind map with each other's partners and linked our interests together. So what I really like about this part of the project is that they're really starting to see that they aren't separate entities, but actually they can begin to learn from one another. That one was from 2021. This one's from 2018. We've created a bedroom for a fictional character, Sabrina. She is a combination of us, the creators. We wanted to represent a female teenager through a bedroom. Her interests is a mixture of our interests, such as the passion we have for art and for makeup. With the scene of the bedroom, we wanted to leave our audience curious to what had happened, to question Sabrina's life and where she is. We hope to have met our goals over the week working together. So they have created almost a fictional ego for the audience. What I thought was really interesting about this is how they had very quickly decided to use an installational based medium, whereas usually that's rather discouraged by the exam boards. Again, this is from 2018. Our piece is based around one word: cultivate. Relationships with other people, sense of community, awareness for recycling. Our piece is entirely made with recycled materials that have been offered to us by the Paper Garden. So this was a research project that young people put together. They collected these stories and began to kind of, it almost became a research project about their friends that they then presented for us, the audience, to come around and see. This is by Maya Reese, a reflection from Maya Reese. She's this young lady here at the front. I had a great experience during this session because of how well I feel me and my project partner bounced off of each other in terms of enthusiasm and ideas towards the planning of this project. This left me with a great amount of motivation moving forward with this project. Having a group conversation over the breakdown of the project also gave me confidence in the fact that I now feel comfortable in knowing exactly how I plan to conduct and carry myself throughout the project. So she's talking right at the beginning of that making phase where she's thinking about moving forward and being more independent. What I really enjoy about this section of the projects is that the scaffolding that we use to support students in so guiding them in what they need to do within a session is beginning to be broken away. So we're not saying go off and do anything you want. We're saying we have you, but we're slowly going to take that away. And this is Maya responding to that experience. This is by Joe Smith. Joe Smith is the young man at the top of this image. Me and my partner Gracie had to think about the inspiration in our piece and what we wanted our work to convey. We had to be honest with each other about topics in the media that annoyed us, and had to be vulnerable in order to work out what we wanted our piece to educate people on, whilst also being aesthetically pleasing. So Jo is very articulately discussing the discussions that he's having with Gracie, that kind of back and forth, that I think we have come to know as more mature artists, that happen really naturally, and we don't often realize that we're doing. And what I think is really powerful about these projects is enabling young people to have that at such a much earlier age, rather than letting them get to university and figure that out on their own. So before we move into questions, all that is left is for me to thank you again for inviting me, and asking whether you have any questions.
Great. Okay. That was intense. I really enjoyed it because it's been quite a while, and then I suddenly get into that discussion again where I think, and I would take a little bit of your time to translate it to some of the participants, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, jadi para partisipan, para peserta yang ada di ruangan ini, barusan Mbak mungkin ya, Terry menceritakan tentang bagaimana dia sebagai researcher dan juga sebagai guru itu melakukan sebuah riset soal posisi seorang guru dan juga murid di dalam sebuah proyek. Karena awalnya dari kegelisahan Terry sendiri mengenai adanya kurikulum yang mengekang dari pemerintah Inggris, kemudian Terry memutuskan untuk bagaimana caranya untuk membuat sebuah metode kolaborasi dalam kelas sehingga siswa-siswi ini dapat tetap belajar secara kolaboratif, kemudian juga mereka tetap lepas di dalam proyeknya masing-masing dan tidak dalam kekangan struktur kurikulum tersebut, tapi tetap bisa memenuhi indikator dalam kurikulum tersebut. So okay, so there is a question coming in. I want to ask you first, because could you tell us a little bit more practical about, have you ever experienced where students are reluctant to to participate in that situation where the students are kind of shy, probably a little before the project, and then have you ever experienced where you have to kind of like push the students into the project, or do you just happen to have a classroom that is participative, or those kinds of things?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's something that has developed over time. As each iteration goes by, we understand with more clarity how to prepare the young people for these projects. So what I will usually do is 6 months before, 5 months before, 3, 2, I will begin to kind of drip feed the information into the students that there's going to be this project coming and it's very exciting. And we will start to say, when we do the collaboration, what are the things that concern you? And we will start to begin that dialogue far, far in the future of when it begins. So an example of this is I have a young person, Abby, in this group that we're doing right now, who is extremely shy and extremely anxious when it comes to talking in front of other people, sharing her ideas. And so what I did is I sat down with her about 4 weeks before the project began and said, if and when we begin this project, tell me who you would like to work with that makes you feel more secure. And then, so she gave me a couple of people that she thought that she would feel comfortable working with. And then I had a conversation with that person. I said, so I in some instances, I create collaborative pairings that for really high achieving students, I would often pair them with someone that's going to really contradict them. So they have to work a little bit harder. For those students who, like you're suggesting, find working with others much more anxiety inducing, I would negotiate those conversations with them much earlier. And I empathize with what you're saying, because earlier, right back in kind of the C collaboration 1 phase, often we would have young people say, well, I don't want to do it. And, you know, that's absolutely fine. We don't, as researchers, want to coerce anybody into anything, but creating the work within the curriculum time, in the classroom time, rather than extracurricularly, allows us to kind of say, well, this is part of your project, this is part of your work that you're doing for your class, how can we renegotiate it for you? So it's much more dialogical. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I mean, it's a little, it's a difficulty on its own, but there probably it's more, I don't know, it's more a personal kind of approach rather than, you know, a standardized kind of method. So it's
absolutely, yeah. And I think we know our students, right? Every teacher knows the students in their classroom. It is our job as the educator to stand back and say, who needs more of me and who can do with less of me? So you begin to work the room, you begin to work the relationships with their anxieties in mind and adapt yourself to them.
I see. Okay, I can see it a little bit how you manage to that, I think. And we have a couple of questions coming in. So the first one is from Dinda Ayu. Dinda Ayu is a student from Art and Design Department. So she would like to know about the consequences. Is there any difficulties or side effects in organizing such projects? I mean, probably from the management or the I don't know, other stakeholders that you said it earlier in the presentation that the curriculum are designed to the ideology of the institution or the other bodies that attach to the institutions and something like that. So is there any difficulties in that? Is there any consequences in doing those kinds of, you know, experimental in a quote unquote?
Yeah. Do you mean consequences for me, consequences for the institution, or consequences for the students?
I think consequences for the, I don't know if this is right for the, I think Dinda probably can type it a little bit to clarify it, but I would like to know the consequences for you as an artist teacher, as well as a teacher inside the institution and the students.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with myself. In terms of consequences for me, it's kind of twofold. So when I began doing this, I was a teacher at the beginning of my career, and it meant that because I was at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak, I had to ask a lot of permission to do the things that I wanted to do, and often I would be told no. And then the challenge for me comes in repackaging the project to essentially get round being told no, so that I can do the project that I want to do. And in the past, this has led to me having to kind of be a bit cheeky, if you like, and to do things that perhaps I wasn't supposed to do. but I'm doing it in the best interest of the students as I see it. The consequences in that retrospect are the breakdown of relationships with with your line managers or people above you in the department, because they begin to lose trust in you because you're kind of you're being subversive. As I have developed through my career, obviously now as the head of faculty, there's not really that many people above me that I have to get permission from, and that has just come with time. And I had an interesting conversation with my supervisors a couple of months ago about the kind of feeling like I'm taking advantage of my position within the school to run these projects without having to ask for too much permission. However, actually, I'm in this position for a reason. I've been given this position of trust for a reason. Therefore, I don't think that I'm taking advantage of anyone. In terms of the consequences and side effects for me now, the biggest problem is time. A project like this takes a long time to organize, to gain permission from parents, from young people, finding where it fits in the curriculum. You know, it's extremely admin heavy, but with time the admin becomes, you get used to the pro formas, so you can kind of recycle. In terms of consequences and side effects for the young people, I haven't had any feedback from a young person that have said that they actively suffered any negative side effects to one of these projects. All of the feedback has been extremely positive in every iteration that we've done. A lot of them have gone on to discuss the projects in university interviews. Many of them have created quite long-lasting friendships between schools that have gone on to develop into collaborative practices that exist in studios. I was visiting 2 young people at their studio in London 2 weeks ago that met on one of these projects, and they now share a studio and they're creating work together. So these are consequences, but I don't think that they could be necessarily seen as negative consequences. In terms of the institution, I have a principal who is very understanding of the reason why I undertake these projects. And indeed, when he interviewed me, I kind of put forward that this comes as part of the package of what I do as part of my practice as an artist teacher, and that I would be bringing that with me. And he does have to negotiate on my behalf with other schools in our trust who are much more traditional schools, and so it becomes part of a longer dialogue between me and him about how far we can push this, because obviously if I had my way, we would be working together constantly. However, there are deadlines and there are exams that need to be sat, and so for him it's a negotiation of how much space to give me, how much freedom to give me. And in terms of the exam boards, I mean, they haven't really, whenever I ask them about the practice, whenever I contact the exam boards and tell them this is what they're doing, some of them very quickly say, that's a terrible idea, don't do that, we're not going to give you any marks for it, to which I say, I'm going to do it anyway. And then to others, so the University of Arts London, they are also an exam board. I run this project through them every single year, and they're very, very supportive. So again, it goes back to the ideologies of the exam board, who set up the exam boards. You know, the committee for the exam board of the University of Arts London is extremely different to the committee of the A-level examination boards. We call them AQA. who are very much more traditional and expect these kinds of responses that I was showing you earlier, of the fragmented portrait and collages and those kinds of things. So does that answer your question?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's a lot interesting when you said there's some difficulties. It's obvious that we need to, in your experience, you need to work how to negotiate first, and then work, I don't know how to call it, but our supervisors also always call it works within the cracks, if I'm not mistaken, and if I'm not forgetting that. So yeah, it's the
navigation of the cracks, isn't it? It's working within the structures of the institution to achieve the goal that you think is correct, and often that requires you to be very thoughtful of the way that you phrase or propose things, because you don't want to get anyone's back up, as a turn of phrase. You don't want to make anyone
okay. I hope, Dinda, that answers your question. And it's a little bit, I mean, it gets more interesting when it's being practiced, I think, because this I think the person that is asking is going to teach at school soon, so probably that's going to give her a lot of
good luck.
Yeah. Okay, there's another question coming in. It's from Farahida. So she's asking how I will put it into context. So have you, I think Farahida wants to know if you've done your research in this pandemic situation, or is there any changes, there any adjustments in this pandemic when this pandemic happened? Did you make any changes, or did you make any adjustments, and how did you do it?
Absolutely, that's a really, really good question. There have been changes. So actually, the iteration that we're doing now was intended to begin at the end of the last academic year, and the pandemic hit, and we had to, and all of the schools in the UK closed. So I decided to halt the project. Then the schools opened again, and we decided to halt. And then the students that were actually taking part in the project graduated and left. So we had to begin again. In terms of my, and so we just re-began this project 8 weeks ago, this one that we're currently doing. And then I had to isolate because a couple of the students in this group got COVID, so I wasn't able to come to the school right in the last week of the project. So actually it has been extremely disruptive, but also I think the young people have become slightly used to this stumbling that's happening with education. They're happy to say, okay, we'll just pause for a bit, and then when we get back to school, we'll begin again, and we'll begin again. In terms of the applications that it's had on my academic research, obviously, I'm writing a PhD in collaborative pedagogies, and the number one thing that hasn't been able to happen at the moment is face-to-face collaborations. So after discussions with my supervisors, we decided to take a formal break for a number of months during the kind of really intense lockdowns in the UK, because for a great portion of last academic year, actually, we weren't able to leave our homes. I couldn't get to the library. I couldn't physically undertake any data collection, any research. So we decided to formally break and then restart when things opened again. And actually, it was it was a really positive break in the, I mean, it was painful to begin with, because I thought that it was in somehow a failure to take a break, but actually having that break enabled me to step back and remember, not get tied up in the politics of the fact that I couldn't do it, and remember why it was that I was doing it. So then when we began 3 or 4 months ago, it really felt like a positive move forward. In terms of how it's changed the methods, Agni will remember that back in 2017,
16.
Back in 2016,
yep.
The project brought together students from different institutions to work together. So it's interinstitutional. And as the pandemic gained severity, it became entirely impossible to bring students from different schools together, because in the UK we have what's called bubbling. I don't know if you have that there. So bubbling is where students form a group together, and then they remain within that group. And so if anyone becomes sick within that group, the whole group isolates. So you can't mix two groups together. So it was impossible to bring people from two schools together. So what I decided to do is to actually not worry too much about, I mean, telling a doctoral researcher not to worry is probably like telling somebody not to breathe, but trying not to worry too much about where the students were coming from and who they were meeting, but rather really focus on what it is that they were gaining from each individual collaboration on the ground.
Okay. So the last part, can you repeat it again in a more practical way? I mean,
so I decided to, because I was becoming frustrated that I couldn't bring the people together. And so I decided to spend quite a lot of money creating an online platform that people could work together on. And what I found was that the young people were becoming really frustrated, because I was saying to them, you need to participate in this, you need to do it. And they were like, but I'm full. There's a pandemic going on. I'm too full of all of this information. So what I decided to do was strip back and say, rather than focusing on collaborating between schools, let's just collaborate with each other and really deeply think about what happens when we collaborate, rather than what happens when we collaborate from different schools.
So it's rather than the platform, you trace back to the purpose of the collaboration itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Miss Farahida. So there's the pandemic is a challenge in itself, and I think it's there's another question about that as well, but I hope that what Terry just said already answers most of it. So it's not we can trace back to what we are what our purpose to teach was, what our project started as, so something like that. Okay, I think okay, and yeah, I think it answers her question. So because she said thanks, and because we are running out of time, so I would like to thank you for your presentation, and thank you very much for sharing us this very interesting take on how we can make the best out of making a practice out of a strict or straightforward curriculum, and how we can navigate between those cracks. And thank you for reminding me about this again. It's a lot of fun.
If anybody has any further questions, Agni, please feel free to pass on either my Goldsmiths email or my ESA email, and I'm happy to answer any more questions in depth.
Yes, that's actually what I was going to say again. So I am also asking for your consent to share your material to the attendees. Is that okay? If that's okay, then we will store it in OneDrive, and then we will share it to the attendees later by the end of the conference. So because that's the end of our for the final plenary session. Thank you very much, Terry, for sharing that. And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, okay. I would like to invite all of the panelists from before. I mean, Pak Robi, Bapak Dr. Robi, I would invite you to open your camera again for a photo op. So we will take screenshot a photo from this forum. And I would also invite all of the committees that's in this forum to open the camera as well, and we take pictures with our speakers and panelists today. So I would invite Bapak Mitra and Ibu Wida to open the camera. If I say 3, then please give me your most your attractive smile or whatever, attractive pose or whatever. Okay, I will count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much, Bapak Robi and Terry, for sharing the research that you've done for these past years. And also, I would like to remind all of the attendees to fill in the attendance list. The link is already shared before by Bapak Wibi, if you find it in the chat log. And please, if you have more questions to the panelists, you can send them an email, or you can send me an email, or you can chat us the committees to pass on the questions to the panelists. Once again, thank you very much. That will be, I have to remind you again that after the second parallel session after this, we would like you to come to this plenary again to attend the closing ceremony, because this is going to be the end of our conference for today. This is a one-day conference, and we hope you have fun in listening, and also I hope that you have fun sharing your research with others, as well as having a very delightful discussion with others. That is all from me as a moderator, and I will see you again in this plenary session at 4:15. At 4:15 Western Indonesian time, I will be seeing you again in this plenary session for the closing ceremony. And thank you very much. That is the end of the plenary session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Pak Robi.
Mengajar ini siapa saja, sehingga bisa mulai melirik-lirik itu. Oh, kalau begitu
the liquid herbicides that they're going to work a lot faster. Typically, a lot of these herbicides, you put them down on your lawn, and within 2 to 3 days, you're going to start seeing results. When you're using more of a granular product, like the Spectracide I have here, that is going to take a little bit longer, typically 7 to 10 days, or up to a period of 2 weeks until the weeds that were treated with this are dead. So you're kind of giving up feed for a product that's a little bit more safe. So let's talk through each one of these. First, let's start with Roundup. Now, Roundup is not
Terima kasih banyak atas waktu dan perhatiannya Bapak Ibu. Saya ingatkan kembali, jangan lupa mengisi. Saya ingatkan kembali untuk mengisi. Presentasi yang sudah dibagikan oleh Mas Arif tadi di atas oleh Budi. Tadi ada lain /paralel ICADECS 3. Kemudian juga saya ingin mengundang kembali Bapak Ibu untuk kembali ke ruangan lain lagi utama. 16.15 kita akan mengadakan closing ceremony yang akan ditutup oleh ketua jurusan pendidikan. Saya ketemu lagi dengan Bapak Ibu nanti di plenary session sampai Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Selesaikan dulu. Oh, ada yang belum selesai dah. Ada yang belum selesai. Yang Nami itu nanti, Nami itu yang ruangannya Pak Andreas itu apa? Ganti Pak Andreas, ganti siapa sih? Oh, Pak Anu ya? Pak Andi ya? Pak Andi, masih ada yang belum selesai? 3? Wow. Banyak. Masih berarti. Iya sih. Di situ ada 2. Oh. Kok pindah ke sini dah? Oh, saya omongnya piye iki? Oh, baik, diselesaikan dulu. Ya, nggak usah pertanyaan, Mas. Oke.
Halo. Okay, everyone, I think we're going to wait for a little bit because there are some parallel sessions that haven't finished yet. So I think we are going to wait for another 10 minutes. And I must apologize that we are delayed for the closing ceremony. Thank you very much for your patience.
Rosa kemudian Mas, udah suruh mandi.
I am very sorry and I apologize. I apologize a lot today because I think we will still need to wait like another 5 minutes because there is one presenter that haven't finished her presentation. So we will wait a bit, about 5 minutes, and then we will commence the closing ceremony. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I will start to commence the closing ceremony of International Conference on Art, Design, Education, and Cultural Studies 2021. Please welcome our Head of Department of Art and Design, Ibu Wida Rahayuning Tias, to give the closing remark.
Thank you, Bu Agnisa. Assalamualaikum